Biden still took his victory lap, shouting out one rhino in particular.
Today, we proved that democracy can still work. A lot more work to do. But I want to thank Republican Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell for supporting this bill.
Shortly after the vote, former President Trump said what we were all thinking, writing in a statement, quote, "McConnell has given up all his leverage for the big whopper of a bill that will follow. He is the most overrated man in politics." Well, joining us now is a Republican who did not vote for this ridiculous bill, Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn. Senator, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Tell us your reasons for voting against this.
First of all, it's too expensive to afford. It had a $256 billion structural deficit in this bill. That's how much debt it was going to add over the life of this bill. And the out years, we're going to add even more to our nation's debt. Indeed, we know that this is the gateway to socialism when you look at the programs that are in here. And bear in mind, only 25% of this bill had to do with infrastructure, roads, rivers, runways, railways. The rest of it was all about the Green New Deal and about the agenda that the left is trying to push, how they're trying to push this nation to socialism. So for me, I was in support of a bill that was all about infrastructure. We had a $350 billion bill that had come out of committee, our Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, that dealt with roads and bridges and highways and even broadband. But it did not have these Green New Deal policies that were in there. It did not have the mandates that were in there that were going to drive up and add $161 billion in new fees. You know, they said no new taxes in this bill, but yes, indeed, taxes and fees to the tune of $161 billion.
You know, Senator, as bad as this bill was, I think there was reason enough to not vote for it. Just the fact that it is paired, and this isn't my opinion, we know this from Nancy Pelosi, that it is paired with the $3.5 trillion, the far worse gargantuan Green New Deal. That they are an evil twin, those two bills together. So voting for this was effectively voting for both, whether these 19 Republicans want to admit that or not. And just how bad is it? The Green New Deal right now, at least as planned, and I want to quote here from The Hill, it includes a massive expansion of amnesty for illegal immigrants in the United States. It will, quote, provide a pathway for citizenship in their spending plan. The resolution outlines $107 billion to be allocated to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Democrats are planning to use the funding for lawful permanent status for qualified immigrants. Now, qualified immigrants to them means people who are here on green cards, people here on TPS status, DACA. They want to make somewhere north of 10 million illegal migrants fully legal voting citizens in the United States. I'm not sure we can stop them now, unfortunately, because of what your 19 colleagues did. What are your thoughts?
One of the things we know about Bernie's budget, and I think it's important for people to realize, this is the budget that Bernie Sanders has been touting as he ran for president. This is his utopia. And it would allow for citizenship, a pathway to citizenship for these illegal aliens. It would also put back in place these slush funds at the Department of Energy and at the EPA for all of these outlandish environmental policies that take away the rights of farmers and that are going to take away some of your freedoms. It would also begin to put in place new restrictions on our agriculture community, on small businesses, on towns and cities. And all of that drives up the cost of doing business with the government, whether it's the federal government or your state or local government. It means that more money is going to come out of the taxpayer pocket. And that is why in this budget, to begin to pay for this, and it's not $3.5 trillion. Now they're saying it's a $4.2 trillion budget. And so they're going to up the taxes on the marginal income tax rates. Everybody's taxes are going to go up. You're going to see an escalation in cap gains taxes, in corporate taxes, and again, all of the fees that are there. You're going to see those going up.
Yeah, Senator, there's no question that hardworking Americans cannot afford this additional spending. And on that note, what do you say to your colleagues who essentially handed Biden this big win at their expense?
Everybody is going to vote how they think is best for their states. What I know from talking to Tennesseans every single day, which is something that I do, and I have not talked to Tennesseans who are in favor of any of this spending. They've said, fight it as hard as you can. So I have had amendments on the infrastructure bill. Right now, I have amendments that I have filed on this budget of Bernie's and trying to get some of the spending out of that. Look, every time the federal government takes more of your money, every single time, then you lose some of your freedom. And for our children and grandchildren, we are taking away some of their opportunities at the American dream because their taxes are going to go through the roof.
Right. Absolutely. Inflation now and generational problems later. Listen, Senator Marsha Blackburn, thank you for your courage. Thank you for standing tall. And thank you for being here tonight. Really appreciate it.
You got it. Good to see you. Thank you.
Well, from a group of Senate Republicans who either need to grow a spine or just maybe leave the party, to a Republican governor who's stepping up for conservatives across the country. Florida's Ron DeSantis continues to lead the America First movement and lead it from the front, once again taking on Joe Biden. And
if a principal says that everyone in my school should wear a mask or the school board votes for it, that governor will nullify that. That governor has the authority to say you can't do that. I find that totally counterintuitive and, quite frankly, disingenuous.
President Joe Biden taking yet another shot at Florida Governor Ron DeSantis earlier today, going after the Republican after he announced that the state government could withhold salaries from officials who enact school mask mandates. This comes after the CDC claimed that Florida recorded just over 28,000 daily COVID cases on Sunday. The number, if true, would have set a new record for daily cases in Florida. However, going to the Florida Department of Health, the CDC put out not just a misleading number, but one that was completely wrong. The state health agency says the CDC combined multiple days' worth of cases and reported that number as a single-day count. Joining us to discuss is former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. Chief, great to have you on tonight. Thanks for being with us.
It's great to be with you. You know, it's amazing the contrast that we see. You guys just talked about 19 Republican senators that need a backbone, and yet we've got a governor in Florida who actually has a backbone and is fighting back for freedom and liberty, and we can celebrate that tonight.
Yeah, he sure does. What do you make, first of all, of the back and forth between President Biden and Governor DeSantis? It's been going back and forth for a little while now.
Well, I can tell you, this is all about politics for Joe Biden. What he sees is someone who's actually leading in a state. And quite frankly, this is the same Joe Biden that was applauding Governor Cuomo. When Governor Cuomo was sending people back into nursing homes and causing all kinds of death and adverse effects, you know, it was Joe Biden that was applauding Governor Cuomo, even today saying he did a good job, and yet they're taking shots at Governor DeSantis. Here's the interesting thing is when you see it's a concerted effort, their whole focus is on Florida. Their design is they know that they can't win a re-election without Florida, so they want to take down the governor and try to show the contrast, but it's not going to work. The American people love freedom, not just in Florida, but across the country. In fact, in California, many of them are saying they wish they had a Governor DeSantis.
Right. No, I think you're exactly right, Chief Meadows. I think, number one, the Democrats realize how important Florida is. And number two, other than Donald Trump, the most prominent leader of the America First movement right now is Ron DeSantis. And so they're very much laser focused on trying to discredit him, and thankfully so far totally failing. But regarding Joe Biden, I'm worried that it's more than just idle words and just idle threats, because he's looking for a legal justification to actually intervene. Let's listen to what he said today on that score.
Powers to intervene in states like Texas and Florida where they are banning mask mandates?
I don't believe that I do thus far. We're checking that.
Now, Chief Meadows, I think he perhaps skipped the Constitution Day when he went to law school and doesn't realize that federalism is a thing. But regardless, should we be worried that he's clearly looking, and I'm sure he's got smart attorneys at the DOJ right now, trying to figure out a way that he can overrule Governor DeSantis and other governors?
Well, we should be worried about it because what you see is whether it's a mask mandate or whether it's a vaccine passport, they're looking for ways to make sure that it's de facto federal law from coast to coast, from Florida to Maine and from North Carolina to California and in between. And what happens there is when they start to look at it, they tease it out first. They try to see what kind of reaction. You saw Dr. Fauci today coming out and starting to talk about the fact that all teachers should be mandated to have the vaccine. Well, he didn't do that until the unions came out and said that they're in support of it. So this is a CDC and an administration that holds their fingers up to the wind to figure out which way the wind is blowing, but yet they have an agenda, and it's important for all your viewers to make sure that they vote on the side of liberty and freedom and call their representatives, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. They need to make sure that they stand up in the school boards and in the local governments from not just in Florida, but in other states as well.
Chief, when you talk about these CDC numbers that we mentioned a minute ago, first of all, how does that happen? And second, should Americans be trusting the CDC? Senator Rand Paul put out a video a couple days ago saying, we need to resist these mandates. No one should trust the CDC. Do you agree with him?
Well, I can tell you a lot of what comes out of the CDC is based on politics, not based on the science, and it's not based on good data. I can tell you that I was appalled to find out when I was in the White House that we don't even have actual data in terms of the number of people that get the flu every year, and yet we have it on their website. And if you look, they even have a qualifier on their website where they talk about, well, these are our best estimates that we have. And so to suggest that the CDC is the wealth of all numbers and has all the knowledge there, it just doesn't line up. They get a lot of their information from states. Sometimes that's duplicative. Other times what they did, as they did here, is they actually put the numbers together and report them all at one time. So what do you get? You get these man-made spikes that have nothing to do with anything other than data entry.
That's right. Mark Meadows, always nice to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Jen, Steve. Y'all take care.
You as well. Well, the Chicago Police Department has had enough of their mayor. She's turned former acting CBP Commissioner Mark Morgan. Mark, thanks for joining us tonight. I know that you must feel a connection to this. You not only served in the White House, but the Los Angeles community as well as a police officer there. How fed up do you think these officers are for them to do something like this?
Look, it's powerful. This does not happen much, Jen, where you have police officers actually turn their back on a sitting mayor. Well, let's be honest here. Let's talk about facts. For 2.5 years, this mayor has vilified, betrayed, and abandoned the police department. She's pushed through nonsensical, dangerous policies that restricted the police department from doing their job while emboldening the police department. So it's no surprise that the police officers have had enough, and they did this, and I applaud them, Jen.
Sure. Mark, this is a very personal story for me. I raised a family in the city of Chicago for 25 years. I just recently left and moved, and one of the main drivers of me getting my family out of Chicago was crime, was because of the absolute ineptitude and corruption of Lori Lightfoot. I think Chicago right now, and I think I can make a statistical case, not just my opinion, Chicago is the most dangerous city, not just in the United States, but in the developed world in terms of the randomness of the violence. Now, part of that, of course, is Lori Lightfoot, but I also don't want to let terrible judges and prosecutors off the hook. And I want to ask you about this part of the story. And I think your experience as a cop, you really have authority to speak to this. In Chicago, there's a website called CWB Chicago that puts out great reports on crime. And they detail a recent case there. Prosecutors charged 28-year-old Marvin Flanagan with fatally shooting another man during a home invasion 4 days before Christmas. So it happened before Christmas, but he's just charged now. The allegations make Flanagan the 40th person charged with killing, trying to kill, or shooting someone in Chicago while out on bail for serious felonies. So the point here, Mark, is that this man, Marvin, okay, he was out on bail for gun charges after having served time for previous gun charges. So you have now at least 40 people that website has tracked who have been charged with serious felonies. And instead of sitting in jail, they are let out on either low bail or in many cases, no bail. So don't the prosecutors and judges also deserve a lot of the blame for what's happening in many American cities, including Chicago?
Steve, I tell you what, I couldn't have said it better myself. You're right. The mayor, she's leading the pack, but it is the judges, it is the district attorneys, it's the city council as well. And look, and the mayor, she can't stop it. As the family of Officer French is arranging her funeral, and her partner is in the hospital fighting for her life, and her press conference, what does the mayor do? She still makes some offhand comment about law enforcement is flawed. Steve, what she should have done was look in the camera and say, I want to be clear. If you commit a crime in the city of Chicago, we're coming for you. And I don't care if it's for trespassing, shoplifting, or killing somebody. We're coming after you. We're going to prosecute you with the full extent of the law. And if you kill a cop, I promise you, we're going to find you and do everything we can to make sure you spend the rest of your life in jail. But what did she do? No. She talked about flawed law enforcement and politics and did everything except what she should have done. It's outrageous.
Mark, I want you to listen to something that Lori Lightfoot said that I don't think we would have heard out of her a year ago.
The police are not our enemies. They are human, just as we are. Flawed, just as we are. But also risking their lives every day for our safety.
Mark, I'm sorry, but it doesn't seem sincere. I mean, can she still repair that relationship or lack thereof with the police? And can other Democrat leaders do the same, given what they said last year? Or is it too late for these folks?
Chad, look, I'm glad you showed that clip because that's what it's referring to. She is talking about, again, as the family of Officer French is preparing her funeral and her partner's fighting for his life after being shot by this criminal thug, right, is that she's talking about how police officers are flawed. I mean, she's tone deaf, no context. And look, she's got to go. And Steve, to your earlier point, let's talk about some statistics because you're right. Right now, a 50% increase in shootings since 2019. 469 have been killed in Chicago this year. Over 2,200 shot and wounded. There is a shooting every 2 hours, and someone dies at the hands of a gun every 11 hours. And under Lightfoot's leadership. It's absolutely a war zone there, and she should be impeached, and she needs to go.
Yeah, I completely agree. Mark Morgan, thank you for your service in law enforcement, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Steve. Jen, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. Well, violence isn't...
Why, if it were a country, New York would have the second highest per capita death rate on planet Earth, behind only the country of neighboring New Jersey, where Governor Phil Murphy made all the same mistakes as Andrew Cuomo. For context here, even though Florida has a far larger elderly population than New York State does, the very open and very free Sunshine State boasts a far better track record on COVID because Governor Ron DeSantis aggressively protected the vulnerable, especially those in nursing homes. The per capita mortality rate in Cuomo's New York is an astounding 49% higher than in Florida. But perhaps even worse than forcing the elderly back into these homes is the cover-up. The cover-up is what should have forced Cuomo from office and perhaps sent him to a prison cell. However bad his behavior was with women, and I am not at all disrespecting those who were mistreated, those misdeeds pale in comparison to the cover-up of the slaughter of the elderly in his state. Now, the New York Times broke this story of the cover-up in March of this year. Quote, top aides to Governor Andrew M. Cuomo were alarmed. A report written by state health officials had just landed, and it included a count of how many nursing home residents in New York had died in the pandemic. The number, more than 9,000 by that point in June, was not public, and the governor's most senior aides wanted to keep it that way. They rewrote the report to take it out, according to interviews and documents reviewed by the New York Times. The extraordinary intervention, which came just as Mr. Cuomo was starting to write a book on his pandemic achievements, was the earliest act yet known in what critics have called a months-long effort by the governor and his aides to obscure the full scope of nursing home deaths. By the way, that's some real journalism from the New York Times. You don't see that too often, but we had to commend it when it's out there. Now, Cuomo must be held accountable still for this cover-up. Prosecutors must act. In Massachusetts, they already have, charging 2 nursing home administrators there criminally for knowingly combining COVID-positive patients with other residents, resulting in 76 deaths in just one facility, the Soldiers' Home in Holyoke, Massachusetts. Similar indictments should be handed down for Cuomo and staffers. The families of the deceased in New York deserve justice. At the Isabella Geriatric Home in Manhattan, a staggering 98 people died from the virus in one place, in one facility of 705 beds. At the State Veterans Home at St. Albans in Queens, New York, staff leaked out a list of 48 deaths from this facility of only 250 residents. These proud veterans, they served our country, like Air Force veteran Alexander Ritchie, shown here as a young Air Force serviceman in Vietnam. He's on the bottom row, second from the right. We owe it to Ritchie and to thousands of others to make sure that Andrew Cuomo does not escape from justice, even if he escapes from impeachment in the state capital of Albany, New York. Joining us now to discuss this is a pair of very smart New Yorkers, Congressman Andrew Garbarino and former New York Congressman and Newsmax contributor Peter King. Congressman Garbarino, let me start with you. I want to make it clear, by the way, that I'm in no way dismissing the very real pain that was suffered by these women. But I also believe that there's to use an analogy here, this is a bit of an Al Capone situation. What I mean by that is that Al Capone was sent to prison for tax evasion. But of course, he's not remembered as a tax evader. He's remembered as a gangland chief who unfortunately unleashed murder and mayhem upon Chicago. Those were his real crimes, even though he was ultimately convicted of a much lesser crime. Is that a fair comparison here, the Capone comparison, regarding Governor Cuomo?
Oh, absolutely. I watched his speech today. I thought it was ridiculous that he was saying he was resigning because he loved us. He loves us, so he was resigning. The real reason he resigned today is because his team had to respond to the Judiciary Committee, the Assembly Judiciary Committee, by Friday. And it wasn't just looking into his sexual assault victims. It was also looking into, like you said, the nursing home, the cover-up, the prioritizing of his family for testing. There was a lot of other things that they were looking at. Hopefully they continue to look at it. Hopefully the district attorneys continue to look at it, because the story here is not over. Just because he resigned doesn't mean he didn't do anything wrong.
Congressman King, 15,000 dead in nursing homes in New York State as a result of Cuomo's policies, and he's just now resigning today. Why didn't he get taken down sooner? Why are we seeing this now?
First of all, I agree totally with Congressman Garbarino. This is, to me, is the far greater scandal. And Andrew was actually up there in Albany while this was happening. He saw firsthand what the governor was capable of. Part of it was, I guess this first became known generally in March of this year. And there have been investigations going on since then. The Democrats do control the state legislature. I do believe the Justice Department is still investigating aspects of this. Those investigations do take a while. I think what they're looking at primarily, and I don't have firsthand knowledge from what I've heard, the Justice Department is looking into the false reporting, the distortions of records that were submitted by the Cuomo administration to the federal government. And so that's where it's really at. As far as listen, early on, everyone could have made mistakes. What I find here is not so much the initial mistakes, but the cover-up of it, the continuation of it, and then also making $5 million off that mistake.
Right. You're right, 100%. I think that's such an important point, Congressman King. Mistakes, I think, in the fog of war are certainly forgivable, and a lot of people in the early days made mistakes, surely. But covering those up then is not just a massive further mistake. It is actually, I think, in this case, a crime. Congressman Garbarino, I want to go back to something you mentioned there. You talked about Governor Cuomo prioritizing his family. So it wasn't just policy mistakes. It was also cronyism and corruption. This was written about by the Times Union, and I'm quoting from them. High-level members of the State Department of Health were directed last year by Governor Andrew M. Cuomo and Health Commissioner Dr. Howard Zucker to conduct prioritized coronavirus testing on the governor's relatives, as well as influential people with ties to the administration, such as members of Cuomo's family, including his brother, his mother, and at least one of his sisters. So, Congressman, listen, I guess it's nice to be related to the governor. It's nice that Fredo literally had a state trooper drive to his house to get him tested on an expedited basis. This was at a time when testing was very difficult to get for regular citizens. Is this further evidence of the corruption of this man who I think in many ways thought that he was a king of New York rather than a governor?
Absolutely. I mean, if that's not proof of abuse of power, misuse of state resources, to have your brother and your friends checked out, like you said, when it was very difficult for people, for first responders to get tested as to whether or not nurses couldn't get tested as quickly as the governor's brother got tested. And I think it's a crime. I think they have to look into this. I think that they have to look into the nursing home data even more, the cover up. You know, I was on the health committee. When we questioned Dr. Zucker about the deaths, the amount of deaths, they told us they didn't have it. At the same time, the governor was writing his book. They had the information. They lied to federal prosecutors. They lied to the Assembly and the Senate. The cover-up here is not worse than the crime, but it's a crime itself. And I think the governor needs to continue to go down for this. And we can't forget it just because he's resigning.
You know, Congressman King, a lot of people are scratching their heads after hearing Joe Biden's response to Cuomo's resignation. Let's take a listen to that.
Thought he's done a hell of a job. And I mean, both on everything from access to voting to infrastructure, to a whole range of things. That's why it's so sad.
What do you think about that? You know, this comes just days after Biden says that Cuomo should resign. Is it okay to say he's done a hell of a job on certain things, given what he has done with nursing homes and certainly these allegations coming from women as well?
I thought the tone was totally wrong for today. Listen, I'm willing to admit that his first term, Governor Cuomo did some good things. With each year, it's got progressively worse, and he's caved into the left wing of his party. And that's in addition, of course, to the nursing homes, the sexual assaults, the family cronyism, all of that. So, no, I think Joe Biden struck the wrong tone today. And especially since he was so quick, he was saying 3 or 4 months ago that Andrew Cuomo should be prosecuted. And then he was right out before the Attorney General's report, the ink was even dry. He was saying that Governor Cuomo should resign. Now that he has resigned, he said he did a hell of a job. But also, it seemed like he had looked down at his notes to know enough to say that, which was interesting.
Right. Yeah, I don't think he really knows where he stands, to be honest.
You know, Peter, you mentioned the book contract, which I think is really egregious, right? Reportedly $5.1 million. I'd like to actually hear from both of you. If he won't give that money back, and I'm not going to hold my breath for that, I think the publisher should rescind that contract. Now that he has resigned, now that we learn more and more about his malfeasance as it relates to his management of the virus, the fact that he's been being given a massive contract to supposedly tell the world how to handle this, shouldn't that money be given back? And if he won't do it voluntarily, shouldn't the publisher, Peter, first you and then to Andrew, please.
I think morally he should, whether or not that would stand up in court. I don't know. It is a valid contract, I presume. But the right thing to do would be to return that money, or either that, or donate it to a charity, donate it to a shelter, donate it to COVID patients, whatever. To me, it's the wrong thing to do, to hold on to that money. In many ways, really is blood money. Listen, even if everything had worked out right, to be writing a book in the middle of a pandemic is wrong. And considering everything went wrong, in his handling of the pandemic, it makes it absolutely scandalous.
And Andrew, your thoughts?
I agree. I think he's not going to give it back. He should donate it to those charities or some fund to help the people that the families of people who died in a nursing home. But that's why he's waiting 14 days to resign. He's got nowhere to go. He's going to need that money to buy himself a house. He should give it back. He's not going to, but he should. It is a total disgrace that he wrote that book on the backs of his staff and the blood of people that died in the nursing homes. I think it's a total disgrace. I agree with my good friend, Congressman King.
And Congressman King, real quick before we go, we don't have a lot of time, but in 14 days, New York's going to have a new governor, Kathy Hochul. I know you served with her in Congress. What do you think we can expect?
Yeah, I worked with Kathy Hochul. I was chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. She was a member of it. She was totally bipartisan. She was much more conservative and centrist in those days. But most of all, she is a normal person. So I'm sure I'm going to oppose her on many issues. But in my estimation, she's a good person. And all New Yorkers should be hoping for her success, but still having a real contest with her if she is the candidate for governor. But no, she is very normal. It's the best way to put it. Very intelligent, but most importantly, she's normal. We need that.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you, Congressman Garbarino, Congressman King. Thank you both for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Cuomo's political career isn't the only